Hey guys, today I'm sharing tips on learning Japanese, and I'll start off with a brief self-introduction. I'm King Ho from Singapore. My surname is Tan. People just call me King Ho. And how I started learning Japanese is when back in primary school, I played my first RPG role-playing game, action RPG, and it was a Japanese game, and it was translated into English. But the story just wowed me so much that I felt, whoa, if I can, you know, enjoy the story untranslated in its original full flavor, how wonderful that would be. So that sparked my interest in learning Japanese. So long story short, I enrolled in Japanese language schools in Singapore, mostly weekly lessons for 3+ years. And my day job is supporting games development, software development, trying to bridge the language barrier between Singapore colleagues and Japan clients. Today I'm sharing tips on learning the Japanese language. So, yep, getting better in Japanese. Pardon me, just reading off the slides. So, sharing of tips from a Singaporean learner, mainly for mid to advanced learners, but some parts apply to anyone really, perhaps even for budding teachers. So, the next slide is on the table of contents. We went through the preface, and then the meat of the slides would be firstly the state of being, state of mind, some light but meta stuff, and followed by don't be caught up in your own subjective givens or just don't take things for granted. And then we look into how to weave in Japanese into your daily life. Basically, just find a chance to use the language. And lastly, we have tips and tricks, memory aids, and such stuff. Alright, so without further ado, let's go jump into state of being and state of mind. So this is meta stuff. Well, it applies to not just Japanese, I guess, but in learning basically anything. So firstly, you just accept yourself, meaning to say if you have like classmates and they do better than you or you do better than them, that's secondary. You don't have to care that much. Um, just be who you are and try to maintain that awareness. And why that's important is because it allows you to just be you, just be your usual self. And by being your usual self, you are able to absorb languages, Japanese in this case, and that will help. And if you can maintain being just your usual self, you'll be able to learn Japanese in your very own best pace possible. And the next point is when you learn the language, Japanese, you embrace it and try to just go into the learning in a clean slate, like you don't bring in your own personal or country biases. And one thing I realized in the years of learning Japanese is that each word or each term, they often contain a spectrum of meanings. It's not that black and white. For example, if you search for a certain Japanese kanji, the word for blue or green, you get both the meanings in Japanese English dictionaries, which is both green and blue apply to one Japanese term. So that initially threw me off. It's like, so is it green or is it blue? It can't be both, right? And that's an example of personal bias. I was pretty, I'll say, prescriptive, and I just felt it has to be one way or the other. There's like no two ways about it. So that was a trap. And later on, as I started to learn a bit more about the Japanese language and the culture that shapes the language. For example, this term ao, which is blue or green, or can be both or in between, it harks back to the time when they had like dyes for clothing, and the dye came from a plant, and that plant produced pigment. I'm not very in the know for that, but the whole gist of it is that the pigment is has a range of colors from blue to green, and that's why the term ao in Japanese can mean sometimes blue, sometimes green, sometimes in between. So we just have to embrace it that way and just enjoy what it means. So in sum, we try not to fall into the trap of having exclusive mindset, because then you might block out your chance of learning each Japanese term the way it's meant to be actually. So yep, this is just like a preface or meta thing to bear in mind to stop yourself from your own roadblocks actually. All right, the next slide is a bit of expounding on how you shouldn't be caught up in your own subjective givens or things that you think has to be one way or take for granted. So this particular slide, pardon the example, is based on the Chinese language, but I believe the mentality behind it or why I'm sharing is still of some use regardless of your mother tongue. So don't be bound by givens, delay judgment, and stay for complacency. For example, if you have a word, the one on the slide here is kanji, but the Chinese language has a very similar word for it without the hiragana on the right. But when the Chinese look at this word, and they might go, they might rely or fall back on the original Chinese meaning, which is to walk. But later on, then I found out that in Japanese, this word in question, hashiru, it actually means to run. So, well, walk and run are related, but they're not the same. So, is this kind of things that if I was complacent and I just assumed, oh, this kanji we have it in Chinese anyway, so it's definitely walk, then I would have fallen into this trap of of like taking as a given, and that would like sort of mess up my understanding of Japanese. So in this way, the givens are actually not givens. So that's the sharing point here. Again, it's more of like embracing and learning the language from a clean slate. Just absorb everything with open mind. So then that's the sharing for this slide. Next, we have weaving in Japanese into daily life. This applies more for fellow learners of the Japanese language who are not living in Japan. Like personally, did not have the good fortune of living in Japan to learn the language that in because if you had that, you could just absorb things relatively easily. So this is a bit on how to pseudo um, get that living in Japan environment for yourself. It takes a bit of effort, but it's possible. So let's go down the points. Mixing Japanese language into existing hobbies, activities. Yep. If you like sing in Japanese, you can find your favorite songs, but the Japanese version of it. But if you can't find your favorite songs, you can always learn new Japanese songs and go from there. And personally, I can't sing for my life, so but I still tried, and it still helped me to um learn the language in that sense. So I like Naruto, I like Bleach. They have like rap songs. This is sort of like an embarrassing share, but when I tried to rap it with my very strange repetitive pronunciation, my parents thought I was possessed because maybe I sounded like chanting or something like that. But the thing is, regardless of how off key you sound, like even for me it worked. So hey, it work for everybody, anybody. So that's my sharing here. You try to sing in the language, and that process, I guess it activates a lot of mm, memory. Like it goes down into a memory better. The next point is a bit related. It's about how you mimic if you watch animation, your favorite characters' lines. And the important thing here is speaking out, like saying aloud. Just don't be shy, even if no one is around, even if someone is around, you just focus and you just want to learn the language as well as you can. So you get into character of your favorite character. You try to just, it's a bit like the shadow boxing or boxing. I don't box, but I guess it's where by mimicking it, you engage your five senses and you just keep on repeating it until you get near perfect or perfect, both in terms of speed, intonation, pronunciation. Basically, just become that character and enjoy the process. So, feeling the vibe is the key in this case. All right, the next point is how you further use Japanese, try to engage in the language on daily basis. So for starters, you can read articles of interest in Japanese. I personally use the Smart News app on Android. I'm sure you can find an equivalent on Apple as well. And the trick here is you don't have to stuff yourself silly by reading too much at a go. I mean, if you have the time and you enjoy it, by all means. But I find it works well when you expose yourself to the language on a daily basis, even if it's 5 minutes. You just spend that 5 minutes to read um, some favorite topic of yours. Like I like tech gadgets or tropical fish or stuff like that. I was just trying to find the article for that, and it keeps me going. So it's like a good habit to develop, and naturally, just if you come across terms you do not know, just exercise due diligence and search up that term on a dictionary, be it like manual dictionaries or digital dictionaries, they all do fine. So the trick is regular, frequent, daily will be the best. All right, the next slide is on memory aids and tricks to keep learning fresh. So when I was learning the days of the week for Japanese, I had a lot of trouble trying to just memorize the order. I'm not good at rote memorization. So what I did is, again, I'm no expert on this, but I try to so-called engage both sides of my brain. I'm not sure if I have both sides, but anyway, I try to engage as much as of a brain I have. So the example here is I cook up a story that I myself relate to well. It can be a real story, it can be a fictitious story, but the trick is it has to be relevant to yourself. So the example here I give is for those who know the Japanese equivalent of Monday to say Friday, they actually relate to elements like fire, water, wood, and whatnot. So the order that I tried to learn it was to imagine that I'm a ninja in the forest. So the first cue for learning that first day of the week, which is Getsu Yobi. So Getsu is moon in Japanese. So I started the story with Mori de geppei o tabetara. So geppei is a moon cake. It's not really a cake, but it's like pastry or confectionery. But anyway, so I started visualizing like I'm a ninja. I'm in the forest. I'm eating mooncake. I don't know why, but I'm just eating mooncake in place of rations. So I got like order down like this. So geppei o tabetara. Okay, once I ate the mooncake, kaji ni natta. So kaji, the ka is fire. So kaji ni natta. It means a fire broke out. And this coincides with the Tuesday in Japanese, kayobi. So the order again is like placed there for me. I don't have to memorize it by heart. I just go along with my own story, you see. So I'm in the forest, I'm in mooncake, getsuyobi, that's Monday. Kaji ni natta. Kaji, so kaji is fire. So ka is fire, kayobi. So that's Tuesday. So after the fire broke out, kaji ni natta. After the fire broke out, since I'm a ninja, I have water element powers. So water is sui. So suiton no jutsu. So those of you who watch Naruto might find this familiar phrase. So I just imagine I use this water jutsu. Suiton no jutsu de keshitara. So I put out the fire with my water special move. So you see, suiton, suyobi. Suyobi is Wednesday. So there has to be a fire for me to put out, right? So the order is like after the kaji, after the kayobi fire, the Tuesday fire, I use suiton no jutsu. So I use my water element special move. So that's Wednesday to put out the fire. But after I put out the fire, suiton no jutsu de after I use the water element to put out the fire, suiton no jutsu de keshitara. So moku is wood, and it ties to Thursday. Thursday in Japanese is moku yobi. So moku hen ga tonde kita. So after I use my water element special move to put out the fire, the wood splinters flew towards me. Moku hen ga tonde kita. Again, moku yobi. And it's dangerous. So I use my other special move, my other jutsu of basically it's like gold or metal body. And in Japanese, gold or metal is kin. So kin, it ties to Friday. In Japanese, Friday is kin yobi. So that's how I put in kinton no jutsu. De guard, yattaze. So I basically guarded myself using my golden body technique. Yeah, it sounds lame when translated, but that's how I got my order. Anyway, it's just an example. It's how I use this, I guess, visualization or imagination tricks to remember both particular words as well as the order, if the order is important. And in this case, since it's the order, the days of the week is of some importance. So that's the first memory aid trick. The second point, 5 magic recall timings. 魔法の5回の思い出し is just my anyhow naming, just ignore my Japanese for now. The trick here, I got this from this memory aid trick from another I'll say course, and that's not really Japanese, but I found out that it works for Japanese as well. So say you are trying to memorize some vocab for your JLPT, regardless of 1, 2, 3, 4. You have 5 now, right? Yeah. So yeah, you find that one word. Okay, let's take back the same example I shared in the original Japanese version of these slides. Azayaka, azayaka or vivid. So if you find azayaka especially like hard to memorize for the long term, the trick is to get 5 timings down. So what are these 5 timings, right? Okay, after you learn azayaka, the term for the first time, you try to recall it 1 hour later. Okay, so 1 hour later, azayaka. And 1 day later, what was the word? Azayaka. 1 week later, azayaka. A month later, azayaka. And if you can do it for these 5 timings, the 5th one being the third month, or roughly there, it doesn't have to be exact, you'll find that it somehow goes into your long-term memory. And perhaps this is why the tried and tested way of just memorizing things over and over again, it works. So it works both ways. You can try to get just these like 5 timings down, or you can, if you have the time, memorize a lot. But I found this is especially useful when you're running short of time, but you still want to memorize things. So yep, that's point 2, the 5 magic recall timings to boost your memory for learning vocab. All right, the third point, devise self-rules to mix it up, keep the act of learning fresh. So this is like playing a mini game, or if you will, meta game with yourself. So pick a hobby, whatever hobby yours is. For example, I like to play video games, console games, PC games, whatever. So I would try to set a self rule a bit like the Rock Lee of Naruto, if you will. Okay, so let's say I like Final Fantasy. So before I play it, I'll I'll find the Japanese version of it and I'll change all the settings to Japanese. It's okay if I do not know every single word. I'll get to that later. So there's a sort of like prerequisite of sorts, that a sort of promise with myself. Hey, you want to get better in Japanese, right? If you want to play games, you jolly well find the Japanese version of it, or you don't play it. How strict you are with yourself, I leave that to you. But yep, so that is how I foster the, I guess, environment, especially for people like me who are not in Japan. So I find the video game, the Japanese language version of that, and I'll play it. Settings, voice, and all in Japanese. And a bit more into the details. Let's say I'm playing my favorite Naruto RPG. I'm so into the story. I really just want to press the next just to get the story going. But I stop myself there and play a mini game of sorts. I'll see, do I really understand all the phrases and all the terms they are using in that screen? If I don't, okay, I shall refrain from pressing the next button. I'll go and whip up my dictionary and try to learn the words, at least get down the meanings. And after that, okay, I know all the terms there, and then I press next. Yeah, okay, you get a very slow game clearance rate if ever, but you get a lot more out of your gaming time, you see. You both get to game to some extent, and you get to learn your Japanese language. So that's point three. It's just an example. You can have your own self rules. And the fourth one, keep a list of terms and manually jot things down. The jotting down, if you have paper and pen, that would be great. But if you are more electronic kind of person, even typing it down into, say, a list in Word and Excel, that really helps, as opposed to just checking out terms on online dictionaries and just, take a look and that's it. I find, again, this is more like activating your five senses kind of thing. The more senses you engage in, senses in terms of sight, touch, taste, what else is there? Hearing. Yeah, you get the idea. So the more of your senses you engage in a certain activity, in this case, learning Japanese, and you're like physically typing things down and coming out with your own definition rather than just pasting from the online dictionaries. This very act of doing it helps to make both the act of typing things and noting things down memorable, as well as the term in question. Excuse me. So that's the fourth tip. You try to keep your own list of terms, but when you do so, you manually jot down the list of terms and give your own interpretation, your own description of what that term means to you. Best if you like put down your own example. So when you later on check back, it is much more memorable and it goes into your long-term memory. All right. With that, we've come to the end of the sharing, and just a quick word of thanks. And before that, yeah, let me just do a quick recap of the learning tips and tricks. So 3 points. Point one, when you enjoy, you grow the most. Applies to learning as well. So try to find an activity you enjoy in the first place and see how you can mix in Japanese learning. Point two, a bit meta, if you can pardon me. So the fact that you are learning Japanese and it's by your own choice. if you realize that in itself is actually already like awesome and enjoyable, then you're doing yourself a big favor because you're in this positive mood. And when you're in this positive mood, you joyfully accept, sort of like accept things or absorb things much better in the best way that you can possibly be, in fact. So you can learn that in itself is awesome and enjoyable. That point, my examples are pretty much just examples that I find relevant to me. You can just take what you can take of it, what you make of it, and then you custom fit it, um, mix and match to things that best suit to you, that are most relevant to you. So the takeaway here is magic formula, if you will, how enjoyable you make learning Japanese. Plus, basically, never give up. This is pretty much a sure win. Yes, we say in Singapore, guarantee plus shop, that you will get better in learning Japanese. Yep, and I'm the living proof. If I can do it, anybody can. And credits, yep, Haru Sensei, thank you again. So, and all teachers, everyone is my teacher. That's how I roll. And Japatalk for basically granting me this chance to share. And I have to shout out to my awesome company, my colleagues, my superiors. So Owaki-san, yeah, he's my superior, awesome guy, very understanding, helps out with all my mm, very persistent or pesky language questions as well. YQ, you know who you are. Aiden as well. You guys are the best teammates. Without you guys, I can't even concentrate on this stuff on top of our daily work. So yep. And Bandai Namco Singapore Studios. You guys are the best. Well, of course they sponsored this, but anyway, yep, we have an awesome program going on. That's why I could take up Japa Talk, and that's why I can share with you guys. So thank you so much for listening. That's all I have to share for today. Pardon my bad pronunciation and all that, but yep, I hope it's of some use at least to my fellow learners of the Japanese language. And that's all for the day. Catch you sometime. Sayonara.